Hi, I'm Andrea. I used to think silence meant peace, that if I didn't speak up, my family would know where the line was. But then my sister planned her wedding in my backyard and didn't invite me. They called it our family home, while erasing me from the guest list, the photos, the story itself. Vendors walked through my garden like I didn't exist. A forged contract gave them the right to take over everything I'd rebuilt. And when I finally asked why, my sister just smiled and said, "Be reasonable." But what happens when being reasonable means disappearing quietly? And what if I decided not to? I came home to a quiet house and a stack of mail that had been slid halfway off the table, like someone tossed it there without a thought. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemons. Judine had probably wiped down the counters, though she hadn't said a word to me all day. Not during brunch, when I sat quietly at the end of the table, while everyone else passed mimosas and stories I wasn't part of. Not when I offered to help clean up, and she waved me off with a tight smile that meant, "Don't linger." I took off my shoes by the door and glanced at the clock. It was 2:47 in the afternoon. The late spring sun was pouring in through the back windows, casting warm patches across the hardwood floor. I didn't sit. I just stared at the mail pile. Bills, coupons. A thin white envelope, heavier than the others, sticking out beneath a political flyer. I pulled it free and turned it over. My sister's name was embossed on the back flap in gold. Venetia Bellamont. There it was. Her new name, her future husband's, wrapped in satin print. The kind of envelope you'd expect from a luxury wedding magazine. Curiosity turned to discomfort as I opened it. Inside was a wedding invitation, formal, elegant, thick ivory cardstock, sharp serif fonts, embossed border. The kind of invitation people frame or tuck into scrapbooks. The location listed? My backyard. The Belmont Meyer wedding was to be held at the Foster Garden Estate. I blinked. Slowly. I reread it. Not only was it happening here, where I lived, where I paid the taxes, where I'd spent the last 3 years coaxing the land back to life, but my name wasn't anywhere on it. Not under hosts, not among family, not even in fine print. The invitation might as well have come from a stranger. At the bottom, a line of hosts and acknowledgments, with gratitude to the Belmont family for opening their treasured family grounds. There it was again, rewriting the story while I was still standing in it. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just sat down on the edge of the kitchen chair and held the card in my lap like it might still change if I blinked long enough. Later that evening, we had dinner in near silence. Roasted chicken, potatoes, a too salty salad. Judine always cooked a little too much when something needed covering up. Midway through the meal, I pulled the invitation from my cardigan pocket and laid it gently on the table. "This came today," I said. She didn't look up, just kept slicing her meat. After a moment, she said, "She's your sister." Another pause. "She only gets married once. Why stir things up?" I kept my voice even. "It's happening here, in my garden, on my property, and I wasn't asked." That got her eyes. Just briefly. Then she reached for her glass and sipped slowly before replying. "It's just a garden, Andrea. You act like it's a cathedral." I stared at her. The same woman who used to plant marigolds with me in that soil. The same one who'd cried when Dad died under the willow tree out back. Now it was just landscaping. She went back to eating like the conversation hadn't happened. After I cleared the plates and rinsed them without being asked, I walked out onto the porch with my dog, Bowie. The air smelled like pine and the distant trace of fresh-cut grass. I sat on the top step. Bowie settled beside me, his head on my bare foot, eyes half closed. The moon was just starting to rise, faint behind the trees. I held the invitation in both hands. For a moment, I thought about tearing it, ripping it clean down the center. But something about the crispness of the paper made me hesitate. Instead, I folded it neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into my sweater pocket. I didn't say anything to Venetia. Not that night. Not the next morning. Maybe silence would say what I couldn't. I didn't sleep much that night. The envelope lay in the drawer, tucked under the deed like a secret no one else cared to carry. By morning, the light outside had that bleached, early summer sharpness, like everything was too bright too soon. I fed Bowie, made myself coffee, and stood barefoot by the back door, watching movement in the garden I'd planted, weeded, mulched, and watered with my own 2 hands. Venetia was already out there, her blazer crisp, heels sinking into my lawn as she pointed at imaginary lines in the air. Some man with a clipboard trailed her, nodding like a bobblehead, jotting down whatever plan she had rehearsed in her head the night before. A woman with a headset carried boxes toward the old gazebo. My gazebo. They walked around me like I didn't exist. No one asked if they could plug their extension cords into my outlets. No one checked if my dog was okay with all the noise. They called it the venue, not the house, not Andrea's place, not even our family home. Just the venue, like it had been uninhabited until now. Venetia's voice rang out over the low hum of setup. Let's make sure the aisle comes right up to the lavender bed. I want that color behind me in the photos. That lavender bed was 3 years of back-breaking work and patient soil care. She'd never watered it once. Never asked how I got rid of the root fungus last fall. Now it was part of her vision. I walked toward her slowly, hands in my pockets. She saw me, paused for half a beat, then turned away. But I stepped in front of her path. Did you mean to leave me off the guest list? I asked calmly. She adjusted her sunglasses, eyes unreadable behind the tint. Andrea, come on, don't do this. Do what? I asked. It's just one day. It's a big day for me, and I really need everyone to be supportive. Please don't turn this into something. I kept my expression still. You're throwing a wedding in my backyard. I didn't get an invitation. I wasn't asked. And now it's somehow my fault if I speak up? Her jaw twitched just slightly. I just thought you'd be cool about it. I mean, you've always been a little independent. She smiled like it was a compliment. I didn't want to make things awkward. They already are, I said, turning before she could respond. I walked around the side of the house and sat on the steps that led into the garage, out of sight, but still in range to hear every word that floated through the summer air. I wasn't sure if she had told everyone to ignore me, or if that just came naturally to them. Later, while I was trimming the creeping thyme along the garden's stone path, one of the catering assistants passed by, holding a clipboard. He tapped the woman next to him on the elbow and nodded toward me. Is that the logistics girl? He asked. She's the one managing the vendor schedules, right? The woman laughed. No idea. Venetia said to just ask the planner if we get stuck. The homeowner's not involved. Not involved. That hit harder than I expected. I didn't correct them. I didn't even look up. I just finished trimming the thyme, wiped the sweat off my neck, and went inside without a word. That evening, after the noise had quieted and the trucks were gone, I sat down at my desk and opened a fresh folder on my computer. I labeled it Event Documentation. Then I walked to the filing cabinet, pulled out the property deed, and laid it beside me. I opened my browser and started looking up county ordinances for outdoor events on private property. I downloaded the local permit form and read every line of it twice. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I was just trying to understand where I stood, because it was becoming painfully clear that no one else cared to. I began snapping quiet photos of vendor vehicles, of paper instructions taped to my shed, of electric cords running from my sunroom. Nothing invasive, just proof. Not to fight, not yet. But to be ready. Before I shut down the computer for the night, I opened a blank document and typed one word at the top. Bolded, center-aligned. Witness. I stared at that word for a long moment before closing the file. The following morning started with the dull thud of folding chairs being arranged on my back lawn. I heard them clatter against one another before I even finished my first cup of coffee. The kitchen window gave me a full view, white vinyl chairs in a near-perfect circle, nestled right in front of the rose bushes I had pruned last week. No one had told me there'd be a family coordination meeting, but from the way everyone moved, brisk, sure, rehearsed, it was obvious I was the only one who hadn't been informed. I didn't ask for an invitation, I just showed up. By the time I stepped outside, a few cousins had already taken their seats, chatting lightly about caterers, dress alterations, flights. Venetia stood in the middle, in her usual cream slacks and pastel blouse, clipboard in hand, like a wedding general. Judine sat 2 seats away, nodding occasionally, like she was proud to witness her daughter in charge of something. Neither of them acknowledged me. I stayed standing. No one offered me a chair. Venetia cleared her throat and began listing off updates like she was reading from a press release. Florist was confirmed. Cake would be delivered the night before. Final RSVP count expected by Monday. No mention of property access, of course. No mention of me. "This garden," Judine interjected mid-update, placing one hand dramatically over her chest, "has always been such a welcoming space for family." Not a glance in my direction. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. Instead, I folded my arms, kept my eyes fixed on a squirrel running along the fence. Something about that animal had more dignity than the people sitting before me. Someone passed around a mock-up of the guest seating chart. It went from hand to hand, and when it finally reached me, I scanned it. No table for me. Not a placeholder, not a question mark. I wasn't on the list. I looked up, met Venetia's eyes, and she just blinked slowly like nothing about this was strange. No apology, no flicker of discomfort. Then the lighting crew arrived. 2 guys in polos, with sunglasses and walkie-talkies, lugging metal stands and battery packs toward the gazebo. One of them stopped and pointed to me. "Do we check logistics with her?" he asked Venetia. "She's the gatekeeper, right?" Venetia gave a short, airy laugh. "Oh no, she's the neighbor. It's complicated. Just ask the planner." The neighbor. It wasn't even clever. Just cruel. I didn't say anything. I didn't flinch or correct her. I simply turned and walked back toward the house. My hands didn't shake. My breath stayed even. But something inside me slid sideways. It wasn't shock anymore. It was something colder, sharper. I slipped inside through the laundry door and bolted it behind me. By late afternoon, the chairs were folded and gone, leaving yellowed patches in the grass where they'd flattened the clover. I made myself a sandwich I didn't finish and spent most of the evening going through my father's old documents, tucked away in the oak lockbox beneath the bookshelf. I hadn't opened it since we buried him. There, folded with military precision, was the original deed, dated, notarized, signed in clean ink. My name written in the margin in his handwriting. To Andrea, when she's ready. I stared at those words longer than I should have. Then I began to build a timeline, starting with the invitation I wasn't sent. Vendor arrival times, dates of setup, number of chairs placed without consent, quotes overheard, orders issued by Venetia. All of it in neat bullet points. This wasn't about proving a point anymore. It was about showing what happens when someone believes they can rewrite the truth simply by saying it louder. Before bed, I checked the back door again, still locked. I shut the blinds in the guest room, facing the garden. Not to block them out, but to stop giving them the satisfaction of being seen. They wanted me invisible? Fine. I'd make my absence loud. By midday, the chairs from the meeting were gone, and so was any illusion that I was part of what was unfolding. I spent the afternoon trimming back the rosemary by the front steps, mostly to stay busy, partly to avoid seeing who might show up next with plans for a place I hadn't relinquished. That evening, I found Venetia in the driveway, leaning against her car, sipping an iced tea like she didn't have a thing to answer for. I didn't want to have this conversation there, in front of the mailbox, but maybe that was the only place anything real ever happened between us. "I need to ask you something," I said, flat and steady. She glanced up from her cup. "Okay." "Did you intentionally leave me off the guest list?" I asked. "Or was that just a convenient oversight?" She didn't hesitate. She gave me a half smile, like I'd asked whether she preferred still or sparkling water. Andrea, be reasonable. This isn't about you. That was it. No apology. Not even a pause to consider how it sounded. Just a dismissal, neat and final. Your wedding is happening on my land, I said. Each word clean, no rush. And I'm not even included. That's not just inconsiderate, that's calculated. Venetia's expression didn't change. It's one day. One. You'd really create drama over something that simple? Behind her, I saw Judine standing at the kitchen window. She didn't open it, didn't come out. Just stood there with her arms crossed, like this was some rerun she'd already seen and didn't care to pause for. You act like this is a personal attack, Venetia continued, like she was explaining something to a child who'd misunderstood the rules. It's a celebration. Don't make it about yourself. I nodded once. Got it. That night, while I cleaned up after dinner, alone again, I heard my phone buzz on the table. I dried my hands, checked the screen. It was a message from Carly Monroe, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Hey, just got the invite. Looks like it's at your place. That's wild. Can't wait to see you. Wait, you weren't invited? The question hit harder than anything Venetia had said. Because Carly didn't mean harm. She didn't know. She was outside the family tangle and still managed to see what the people closest to me wouldn't admit. That's when it sank in. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't overreacting. I was just finally seeing clearly. When someone outside the system sees the absurdity, that's when you know it's real. I stepped onto the back patio and looked out at the trees. The garden lights were already strung, elegant, symmetrical, placed like pearls through the branches. I hadn't put them there. One of Venetia's people had come by while I was at the store, apparently. No one had asked. I unplugged them. Coil by coil, I unwound the bulbs from the limbs and laid them gently on the porch railing. I wasn't being petty. I was reclaiming what had been taken without permission. That night, I stayed up late revisiting the property lines, double-checking the city's guidelines on temporary structures, noise ordinances, and liability clauses. I didn't plan to stop the wedding. I just wanted to know exactly how far they thought they could push. When I went back to the drawer beneath my father's desk, I found another envelope tucked inside the leather-bound ledger he used for land records. It wasn't labeled, just sealed shut with a yellowing strip of tape. Inside was a single sheet of paper, worn but official. The notary seal was still faintly raised near the corner. The signature scrawled at the bottom was my name, printed in ink that didn't match the penmanship I recognized as my own. The handwriting was too stiff, too clean, like someone had copied it from a form. It took a moment to register what I was looking at, a forged event use authorization form, stamped with a date from just a month prior. Someone had tried to make it legal. Someone had banked on me not noticing. My hands didn't tremble. My heart didn't race. Instead, I felt that strange stillness again, the one that comes just before everything changes. I took a photo of the form, front and back, and uploaded it into the digital file I'd labeled evidence. I knew what this meant. I knew what they were willing to do, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. The air inside the study felt heavier than usual, like the room somehow knew the truth before I did. I sat back in the chair, phone still in my hand, screen lit with the photo of that forged form. The kind of form that didn't just cross a line, it bulldozed it. Whoever signed it hadn't even tried to copy my handwriting. They just filled in my name like it was an empty checkbox. I stared at the screen a little longer before opening my email and typing a message to James Harrington, my late father's estate attorney. I didn't need legal threats just yet. I needed clarity. The subject line was short. Forged document? I attached the photos and added, "Please confirm this is not binding. I did not sign this. A.L." I hit send. Not 30 minutes later, there was a knock at the front door. Not the kind of knock that waits for permission. Just 3 confident taps and a pause, like whoever stood there had already decided what was about to happen. I opened it to find Venetia standing on the porch, holding a bakery box and wearing a smile 2 shades too wide. Surprise, she said, as if we were filming some feel-good TV commercial. I brought muffins. My arms stayed crossed. She stepped inside without asking, like she always did, brushing past me and heading straight for the kitchen. I followed, slowly, like someone circling a leak in their roof before calling the contractor. I just thought we could clear the air, she said, setting the box down like it was some peace treaty. There's been so much tension, and I don't want it to ruin things. I didn't say a word. Venetia opened the box. Blueberry, cranberry orange, poppy seed, all the kinds she liked. I thought maybe, she said, fiddling with the napkins, you might want to go stay at Melody's during the wedding. You know, less noise, less stress, no pressure, of course, just a thought. There it was. The solution served on a paper doily. I looked her straight in the eye and nodded once. Thanks for thinking of me. I could see her shoulders drop slightly, like she'd just sidestepped a confrontation, like I'd taken the bait. But my answer wasn't a surrender. It was surveillance. Let her think what she wanted. She chatted for another 5 minutes, filling the space with words that didn't need replies. When she left, I didn't touch the muffins. I didn't even close the box. Instead, I walked back to my laptop, opened the folder marked Event Documentation, and renamed it Evidence, Belmont Wedding. Then I opened the city's permit portal and began scanning every page tied to outdoor gatherings: noise, sanitation, fire code, parking. I made notes in a fresh notebook and stapled the forged form to the back cover. Beneath it, I added a sticky note. Never again assume silence means agreement. The next morning, I drafted a second email to the city clerk's office. Subject: Unauthorized use of private property body. To whom it may concern, my name is Andrea LaRue. I am the sole legal owner of the property located at address. A wedding event has been scheduled on my grounds without my consent. Attached is a document falsely signed in my name. Please confirm whether permits have been filed under my address and by whom. I am prepared to take further action if necessary. Sincerely, Andrea LaRue. I hit send again, this time with purpose. The rest of the day was spent photographing more of the prep: floral trucks pulling in, a crew unloading rental furniture under a white tent that had gone up overnight. I asked no one for names, just time-stamped the photos and added them to the archive. At one point, I saw Venetia again, standing with the event coordinator by the trellis. She didn't look in my direction, but I noticed her head tilt when she spotted the lights I'd removed from the branches yesterday. They were still sitting in a coil by the porch. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. That evening, James replied to my email. Andrea, the form is absolutely not binding. In fact, it may be actionable. Whoever submitted that under your name has a real problem on their hands. Let's talk Monday. James. It was enough. I poured myself a glass of water, stood by the window, and watched the last bit of light stretch across the garden like it always had. Quiet, unbothered, mine. I didn't sleep much that night, and not because I was anxious, because I was alert. Every detail from the last 2 weeks started stacking neatly in my mind, like books on a shelf. The forged signature, the neighbor comment, the way Venetia had offered muffins as if they could mop up betrayal. At 7:38 the next morning, I sent the document to Leland. No context, no greeting. Just the scan and a simple message. Recognize this? It took him 5 minutes to respond. This isn't okay. I didn't know. I thought Venetia had your permission? I stared at the screen, blinking once. I didn't feel anger exactly, just confirmation. The kind that doesn't burn. It cools you, makes you sharp. I typed out one line back. I didn't ask what you thought. I just wanted you to see it. No reply after that. Silence. The kind that says more than scrambling words ever could. I sat back and let myself drift for a moment. Not into sadness. Just clarity. Leland had always stood near Venetia. Not with her, exactly, but close enough to benefit from her shadow. I thought of a Christmas party years ago, before the house was fully mine. Venetia had made a joke about my botanical obsession in front of his work friends. She thinks pulling weeds is therapeutic, she'd said, lifting her wineglass. He'd laughed a second too long. I remembered it because I'd tried to laugh with him, and it felt like swallowing sand. Back then, I didn't know what that moment meant. I do now. It meant I had always been a little joke they kept in the family for texture, something rustic, grounding, just not real. Around 10:15, as I was reviewing county codes again, another email came in. This one from an address I didn't recognize. Garden Light Staff 87, protonmail.com. No subject line, just a single sentence in the body. You didn't sign this. Attached was a high-resolution scan of the forged event form. This version was cleaner, with visible metadata embedded in the image properties. Date stamps, editing software used, IP address origin. Someone had gone the extra mile to show their work. A second line followed just a few seconds later. I'm not with them. If you need me, I'll testify. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Whoever sent it had already given me what mattered. Confirmation from inside the machine. Someone saw what was happening and quietly stepped out of line. I opened a new folder on my desktop. Leverage. Inside, I dropped the file, tagged it with the alias, and added a bullet in the timeline labeled Anonymous Witness, Doc Match plus Metadata. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt like laying bricks. Quietly, carefully. By late afternoon, I had 3 labeled binders. One for permits and land use codes, one for correspondence and photos, and one for all legal assets tied to the property. The last one had a small sticky note on the cover. If I disappear, start here. It was a joke. Mostly. I didn't tell Venetia any of it. I didn't tell Judine. I didn't write a message, send a warning, or storm a conversation. Instead, I closed all the blinds facing the backyard, taped a small sign to the inside of the kitchen window that simply said, Private access by owner only. That night, I walked the perimeter of the property with Bowie at my side. I checked all the locks, including the gate by the old orchard no one remembered existed. By the time the sun dipped behind the hill, casting long shadows across the lawn, the plan wasn't just in my head. It was in folders, in writing, in timestamps and signatures, and silence. And maybe that's what power actually feels like. Not rage, not victory. Just the kind of certainty that doesn't shake when someone lies louder than you. 2 mornings later, I woke to the sound of tires crunching over gravel and voices that didn't belong. I pulled back the curtain just enough to peek through and saw a cluster of camera equipment being unloaded from the back of a box truck. Crew members in branded t-shirts moved with that quiet confidence of people who'd done this kind of shoot 100 times. One of them carried a clipboard. Another was already unwinding dolly track across the length of my garden. They didn't ring the bell. They didn't knock. They moved like they were entitled to the space, because by Venetia's design, they were. I didn't go out. I didn't confront anyone. I sat in my bedroom, cross-legged on the edge of the bed, sipping lukewarm tea and watching from behind the sheer white curtain. The window overlooked the south side of the property, what Venetia had described in one planning call as the perfect backdrop for the family legacy narrative. Legacy. They were setting up their angles now, the dolly gliding past my rose bushes, those same bushes I had trimmed back just 3 nights ago under a headlamp when the sun had already dipped below the hills. A woman in black leggings and a headset walked past my tomato bed without noticing she was stepping into fresh mulch. I watched the heel of her boot sink and twist. She didn't even look down. One of the men with the clipboard paused mid-sweep of the camera to point across the yard, toward the old trellis I'd built by hand. Should we feature the woman in the sun hat? The one near the trellis? I realized they meant me. I'd stepped onto the back steps without thinking. Still in my gardening hat, Bowie curled at my feet. I wasn't doing anything, just standing there, existing. The reply came swift and clipped. No, no, bride said not to include her. That's just the groundskeeper or something. Laughter, quick and dismissive. And just like that, I stopped existing in the story they were telling. I didn't yell. I didn't even close the door louder than usual. I walked back inside, took off the hat, and rinsed my hands in the kitchen sink. No one turned around to see I was gone. That afternoon, while the crew packed up and their shadows stretched long across the lawn, Venetia posted to her public page, "Honored to be marrying at the family estate that shaped our childhoods, a place of unity and tradition." She included a wide shot of the garden, bathed in golden light. The photo stopped just short of the east-facing window of the house. My window. Intentionally cropped, like she didn't want even the idea of me lingering in the frame. The caption read, "Can't wait to share this special day with everyone who matters." Everyone who matters. There it was. I didn't comment, didn't like, didn't send a passive-aggressive message. I just stared at the post for a long time before closing my phone and setting it on the windowsill like something I no longer needed. That night, I walked room by room and began removing anything personal from the shared spaces. Birdhouses, a sun-faded wind chime with my father's initials carved into it, the clay planter tags I had labeled by hand back when I was experimenting with heirloom herbs. I boxed them gently, without anger. I just needed them out of reach of cameras and people who didn't care to understand what they were touching. After I packed the last item, I stood at the kitchen window and stared into the darkness. There were still a few LED lights strung across the trellis. Hers, not mine. I didn't pull them down. I let them hang, sterile and hollow, like someone trying to imitate joy with a plug. Then I opened my laptop and clicked into the folder I had labeled Contingency. Inside, a file titled Public Statement, Draft Waited. I didn't add anything to it. I didn't revise the language. I just read it again, slowly, word by word. And then I closed the laptop, locked the door behind me, and went to bed. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way people expect. I was past the stage where noise felt like power. I didn't need to make a scene. I just needed to make sure they couldn't pretend I'd never existed. The next morning came slow and gray. I woke to the smell of damp earth and the low rumble of vans pulling up outside. Through the fogged kitchen window, I could make out silhouettes unloading folding chairs and white tent poles, their figures blurred by the drizzle still lingering from last night's rain. It wasn't heavy enough to stop anything, just enough to sink into the soil. I brewed tea, moved without urgency. The kettle hissed softly behind me as I leaned on the counter, staring out at the lawn. The garden, my garden, was no longer quiet. Laughter floated in from the driveway, the kind of laughter that comes from people who think they're exactly where they belong. I didn't open the door. I didn't greet anyone. They didn't knock anyway. Around 9, music started playing through portable speakers. Someone tested a mic. Check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2. I could hear the static pop against the tent fabric. Then came the clinking of glassware, the hum of conversation. People finding their seats, brushing off their jackets, adjusting hats in the reflective sheen of parked car windows. I remained at the kitchen table, sipping tea that had long gone cold. Bowie lay at my feet, half asleep, occasionally perking his ears at the sudden bursts of applause or camera shutters. Then, just past 11, it happened. One of the blue porta-potties near the side fence leaned, then gave a sudden groan, like wood snapping under weight. A few guests turned to look, then a shout. The structure tipped once, righted itself, and then crashed sideways into the flower beds. The back panel split open, waste spilled out, dark and slow, like molasses across the grass. It reached the edge of the aisle first. Then it seeped under the white linen runner Venetia had special ordered. Then the edge of the bride's platform, where the floral arch sat in full bloom. Screams. Panic. The kind of chaos you can't choreograph. I stood by the window, watching it all unfold like the third act of a play I'd never auditioned for. One woman in heels slipped trying to avoid the mess. A groomsman flailed his arms to steady her, knocking over a champagne tower that had just been filled. And in the center of it, Venetia stood frozen, her train already streaked in mud. From where I stood, I could see her mouth moving, barking orders, at vendors, at the planner, at no one in particular. Her voice didn't carry through the glass, but I knew that tone. It was the same one she used when we were kids, and she broke something, then blamed me before anyone could ask. I turned away, closed the curtain slowly. There was nothing left for me to witness. I walked upstairs, picked up the book I'd been trying to finish all week, and settled into the corner chair beneath the window that faced the orchard, far enough from the garden that I couldn't hear the yelling anymore. I didn't feel joy. Not exactly, but I felt something settle inside me. A release. They had built everything on land that didn't belong to them, without asking, without listening, without care. And now it had all sunk, quite literally, under the weight of its own assumption. Later that evening, after the cars had rolled away and the last of the music had gone quiet, I logged on to the Ashland Journal's website. Their Sunday digital section was already live. A feature piece sat right at the top. Belmont Meyer Wedding, Elegance in Oregon. I clicked. The article was brief, polished, sanitized. It mentioned the location as a historic family estate nestled in South Ashland, referred to the bride's dress as effortlessly classic, and brushed over the disaster with one neat phrase: a minor equipment malfunction. The last paragraph thanked the wedding team, the caterer, and the Belmont family for graciously opening their estate to host this special occasion. No mention of me, not even a line. I scrolled to the photo attached, Venetia and Carson standing under the floral arch just before everything collapsed. The camera caught the moment with cinematic glow, as if the ground under them hadn't turned to sludge minutes later. I closed the browser tab, let the screen fade to black. Then, for the first time in days, I smiled. Not the kind of smile you show off in photos, the kind that comes from finally recognizing what's no longer yours to carry. Some omissions say more than any quote ever could. The garden took nearly 2 weeks to drain. The rain that followed the wedding had nowhere to go, pooling along the slope where Venetia's tent poles had left deep holes in the soil. I watched from the porch as the grass yellowed in patches, the muddy paths hardened like bruises turning stale. I didn't rush to fix it. Instead, I waited. I walked the grounds in the mornings with Bowie at my side, surveying the aftermath like a farmer inspecting fields after a storm. Some plants had drowned. A few of the herb beds were unsalvageable. But the roses survived, and the lavender bent but didn't break. I spent a quiet Sunday afternoon turning the soil by hand. I removed ruined annuals and replaced them with hardy perennials. Thyme, sage, and black-eyed Susans that could stand up to heat and neglect. My hands worked with steady rhythm, not urgency. No one from the wedding reached out, no apology, no acknowledgement. And strangely, that absence didn't sting anymore. It felt clean. I stopped checking for new articles. I stopped glancing at Venetia's social media feed. I even archived the digital folder titled Evidence and placed the physical binders into a locked drawer in the basement. Some battles don't need to be fought out loud. They just need to be recorded, in case. James and I met at a little cafe near City Hall the following week. He handed me a notarized document over a mug of weak coffee and told me, "You're covered now. Nothing can be scheduled on your land again without your written, notarized consent. We closed that door." I nodded and signed the copy, not because I needed proof, but because I deserved boundaries in writing. We didn't mention Venetia. Back home, I painted the old garden gate a deep, calm blue. The color reminded me of the Oregon coast, of sky before thunder, of still water. It wasn't for anyone but me. I hung a sign I'd carved from cedar at the entrance path, just beside the row of salvaged peonies. The letters were rough, imperfect, etched slowly by hand. Private residence. This land is lived in, not borrowed. No one saw me do it. No one needed to. The house felt different now. Not emptier, just more honest. Judine hadn't come by since the wedding. I'd heard through Carly that Venetia's event sponsor quietly dropped her from their client list. The wedding footage was never released. It didn't matter anymore. One morning, I sat beneath the trellis with a book and a cup of chamomile tea, Bowie curled in a patch of sunlight beside me. The air smelled like mint and wet earth. I listened to the wind move through the trees and didn't reach for my phone once. Not because I was waiting for anything, but because there was nothing left I needed to prove. Forgiveness hadn't arrived. Closure hadn't knocked. But peace? It came quietly, like moss growing over something that finally stopped being disturbed. I had spent years thinking I needed to reclaim space that was taken. But what I really needed was to let it become mine again, on my terms. Some roots rot, others remain. And the ones that stay? They grow stronger without asking for permission.